My name's Kelsey. I am originally from Arkansas, from a town called Bentonville, where Walmart is based, so big company town. And I've lived in Austin, Texas for almost a decade, moved down here after college. I'm a historian, so I have a master's degree in historic preservation. I work with buildings and I work with objects. I co-own a vintage furniture store with my sister. I have also been an architectural historian. I have a lot of jobs. I've also been an architectural historian, so I do like survey work and things like that. So it was like August 2017, and I was finishing up my master's degree at the University of Texas. So I was spending all summer writing my thesis, and I was super exhausted and super stressed out, not feeling too great. And I was having a lot of like allergies and stuff. If you've been to Austin, you probably had some flare up, so it's not uncommon. And I had a lymph node that started kind of just growing on the back of my neck right here, about the size of a quarter. And so I went into my primary care doctor to get some routine medications filled, and was like, oh yeah, by the way, got this thing, probably nothing. Cause I was one of those people, I'm kind of a natural hypochondriac. So I have kind of trained myself to be the opposite. So I was like, it's probably nothing. And they, got me some antibiotics. It didn't do anything, came back, another round of antibiotics, didn't do anything. And my primary care doctor was like, if this wasn't moving, I would be worried this was cancer. So I was like, what? So when I went back the last time and it hadn't done anything, they referred me to an ENT. They had me do some blood work, which came up clear essentially. And I did a little celebration, and I went into the ENT and he prescribed me more antibiotics. And then, when I went up for my follow-up, at that point, I had this lymph node, my supraclavicular node, I can't ever say that, on my right side, grow to about the size of an egg, literally overnight. So I went in, and the look on my ENT's face went from like jovial. I remember I had no air conditioner in my car, and it's Austin in August, and I get to the ENT and I'm like dying, I'm like melting, and they're like, oh, you poor thing, haha. And like the doctor comes in and he just ashen faced immediately when he feels it, and he leaves. And I know something's up when the nurse comes in and she like hands me a ice cold bottle of water because my AC was broken. She's like, I figured you were hot. And I was like, so yeah, my doctor came back in and he was very concerned, and he was like, I want to do like a needle biopsy. And that it was just this like, wait, what? Like, whoa, where's the antibiotics? Like, give me more of those. Just totally not on my radar. And so he did like an ultrasound, he did the needle biopsy, and it didn't hurt at all. And I said something along the lines of like, but aren't like cancerous lymph nodes not supposed to hurt? Because this one hurts pretty bad. And he was like, well, I just stuck a needle in it and you didn't feel it. I was like, and then he was, talking to me about results and when I'd get them and stuff. And I just remember looking at him and being like, but tomorrow's my birthday. Like that was going to make him not diagnose me with cancer. And he looked at me and he just went, happy birthday. Like he was trying to be nice. He had no idea what to say. So the next morning I woke up to a phone call from the nurse that they thought it looked like lymphoma, and they wanted me to do like a neck dissection biopsy. I mean, God, I woke up on my birthday. It was a 9 a.m. phone call. I just like sat there and bawled in my bed for a couple hours, called my husband, or my fiance at the time. And then my fiance had called my two roommates and let them know what was going on. And when I walked out of the room, I just fell into their arms. It was very sweet. And they like got me Chick-fil-A for my birthday. They like tried to make it fun. So, but I remember actually thinking, oh, this is actually a relief because lymphomas are typically pretty treatable. Like I remember that was part of it. I was like, oh, I'm glad it's not something, oh, I'm just like hyper paranoid person who is on like, I'll just go down a, rabbit hole. And the second by the end of that night, I knew what every lymph node was called and what it drains to and what it could possibly be. And I knew that this one swelling was really, really not a good sign. So, and he had told me, you know, he was thinking lymphoma would be the most common thing. And that was what I really had dug into. I mean, honestly, I tell a lot of people I've met that are talking to me because they were recently diagnosed, because that's such an anxiety inducing time, that the wait is the worst. I mean, not the worst in terms of like how you're feeling, but like emotionally, it's horrible. And it took them a really long time to get me diagnosed, and I went in for one surgery and it was inconclusive, and then I went in for another neck incision. And I remember I was like laying after in recovery, and this OR nurse comes in, and he's kind of like a skater bro type, and he's like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea who you are." And he was like, "I was your OR nurse last time." And I was like, "I would not have been awake. I don't know." And he was like, "Yeah, man, like the doctor was so pissed when they couldn't figure out what was going on. And he like stayed on the phone until the lab made sure they had enough tissue before we woke you back up." And I was like, "Cool." So I made a friend while I was like passed out, I guess. Like my ENT was super adamant about getting a good sample. So he made sure there were conclusive results before he woke me up out of my anesthesia. So I knew then. And then there was the PET scan that would show the spread. And that was honestly, when I think of like some of the worst days of my life, the day I had that PET scan was just horrible, because not only are you jacked up on a weird carb-free, caffeine-free diet, but you're just sitting there while something is telling you how bad it's going to be. And I've never felt that way. It was horrible. You know, there was just something about at that point, I had already been through so much analysis. I had been through like so many different tests, et cetera, et cetera. And I, you know, still had tons to go before I could start chemo, but it was just kind of those things where at that point I was just exhausted, and my parents were there and they were emotionally exhausted. And something about having a machine like analyzing me for an hour or so and telling me like what my chances of living are was just really difficult for me to handle. But I remember leaving the PET scan and just collapsing in my dad's truck and like just being, you know, so upset like that night, and like having like an upsetting conversation with him, because he was always the one that had the answers for me and he didn't have them this time. And so it was just one of those things where I think we were just so emotionally exhausted at that point, we just kind of collapsed. Yeah, having like knowing once I was staged, then I honestly was, after that it was just like a matter of getting going. My anxiety was so much better. So yeah, I think the worst part was knowing, and then knowing what I had but not how bad it was. And then, you know, because I had a friend recently with Hodgkin's lymphoma. His was refractory and he's fine now, but it was, you know, it was a very scary ordeal. And so that was my only experience with lymphoma, was his experience. So my ENT referred me once I got a preliminary diagnosis. He referred me to an oncologist that he refers a lot of people to, that he really liked in town. And I was a little hesitant. You know, we live really close, not really close, but we live 2.5 hours from Houston here in Austin. So we were close to MD Anderson, and they were on my insurance, and they had saved my grandmother's life. So we already had like kind of a relationship with them. And I was pretty adamant about getting a second opinion there. Now I know, honestly, with my diagnosis, it probably wasn't necessary. But I don't regret going and getting that second opinion. I told my ENT that I was going to do that, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, you do what you need to do." To me, I wanted someone that was willing to answer my questions and like actually take time with me. But also, I think that the thing that still draws me to this doctor, or any doctor I've had, is interest in like me as a person. Because when someone is like in charge of saving your life, you want them to actually care about your life and find it interesting and find it important. So I started ABVD in November. So it was September 22nd was the day I got diagnosed. That was my birthday. And then I didn't start till after Thanksgiving. So, or till right before Thanksgiving. So it was a 2-month wait. My first round, I was terrified, obviously. But I started feeling improvement of my symptoms almost immediately. And I was really lucky that I didn't have like an allergic reaction or anything to the chemo itself. So my initial reaction was pretty mild. I lost a little hair. I ended up shaving it anyway. After that. And I was, mildly sick, etc. But my itchy legs resolved immediately. And I think that was also possibly because my immune system was being repressed. But I immediately felt better. It was very crazy after my first round. It was surprisingly not that emotional for me. I had the year before, I'd always had really long hair like this, but longer. And the year before that, I had just like chopped it all into a really short bob. So I'd already kind of made that leap. And then I don't know, I just kind of, when I found out I was going to lose my hair, I started dyeing it weird colors and kind of having fun with it. And then cut it into like this really cute, like super, super short cut that I would never just do on my own. And then after my first round, that was starting to fall out. So I shaved it. So I kind of had fun with it. I don't want to be bald again. I don't think it's a good look for me, but I wasn't super torn up about it. My mom actually owns a wig shop. She owns a store that sells like wigs and breast prosthesis and bras for breast cancer patients. And she has since the 90s. So I'd been around wigs my whole life. So she kind of hooked me up with a couple that I would wear sometimes, but I was kind of more au natural. But I was also in Austin in the winter and it wasn't really that cold. So it was fine. Yeah, I got a list and I'm sure most people do. That's about 20 pills long of if this doesn't work, move here. If this doesn't work, move here. And I was very on top of my anti-nausea meds. I had I think I had Dex. I had steroids. I had olanzapine, which I don't like what it did to my head, but it was so good. I had almost no nausea. It was actually pretty incredible. I mean, not my head, but it was just more of like, it just made me feel very like, I would get really paranoid. I took a lot of lorazepam for the nausea. That was kind of one of the main ones. And then I had actually, I don't know, I had a friend send me some like cartridges of medical marijuana from LA, and that was that made me such an advocate for medical marijuana, because it was one of those things where I was like, I was never anti marijuana or anything like that, but it was one of those things where I was like, whoa, when I'm taking this at a particular dosage for a particular reason, that this cut through like 4 different anti-nausea meds that I usually take, which are really messing with my head. And so it became one of those things where I was able to cut out certain meds just by substituting that like in the morning or whatever. It was honestly pretty incredible. So after my first round, I went in for my second infusion, and they do all the blood work and stuff, and they were like, "Whoo, that really knocked out your white blood cells." And I was like, "Oh, okay." They were like telling me that neutropenia is pretty common in Hodgkin's lymphoma patients, and I had really low white blood cell count the whole time. And they could not give me Neulasta to up my white blood cell count because it would interact negatively with the bleomycin, the B and the ABVD. And so I couldn't have that, and I just kind of had to live with it, which I was just careful, and it was fine up until Christmas. So about halfway through my infusions, I got pneumonia and ended up in the hospital for almost a week in Arkansas. And that was like the lowest point in my cancer treatment. There was a man in the room next to me that was like screaming in pain the whole time. And like, it was that really bad flu season. It was just very scary. And I didn't want to, it was horrible. And so when I got back to Austin, I had read a bunch of studies and a bunch of research just because that's the kind of person I am anyway. And I don't know the specifics, so I won't like give specifics, but I had read something like people who were going through a certain amount of rounds of ABVD, which was slightly more than mine. If after 2 cycles they like had no evidence of disease, and which I had at that point, I had a clear PET scan, which was awesome. Then you could remove the bleomycin for the remainder to lower that toxicity, because it's very bad for your lungs. And I still have like scars on my wrists from just when I scratched myself when I was on it, like on my arms. So just like a casual, like, you know how you'll just scratch yourself if you've got an itch, but the bleomycin kind of made me like scar so easily. I don't know if you can see it, but it was like, I still have marks on my body when it was just like scratch myself like I just did, like light, and it would leave a permanent scar. So they removed the bleomycin for my last 2 or 3 cycles. I have to remember if I did 4 or 6, but 2 or 3 cycles. And then I was able to have the Neulasta, and it worked really well with me. And it was such a huge relief the rest of the time. It made the whole ordeal way less scary once I was able to have some protection against infection. I think that most people watching this that haven't experienced that probably got a taste of it during, especially like the beginning of the pandemic, when we were all like, Lysol everything, you can't touch anything. I mean, like, I remember we were driving back to Austin after this hospital ordeal, and my dad was like hand sanitizing the like McDonald's cup that he went inside and got for me. And it was like a containment chamber to like, you know, he's a little protective, but that's kind of how it felt. It just felt like every single thing was a danger to me. And like, I had to kind of insulate myself in this little bubble. And it was also really scary because I was really at the, I'm trying to think of the word, but essentially I was living with 2 roommates, and they were really, really good about it, about making sure they weren't like bringing stuff in the house or just letting random people come over, especially during flu season. But I think, God, if they hadn't been, you know, I can't control them. And it's like people living with roommates during the pandemic. I've heard plenty of people have stories like this. So very similar. I think that it's hard to understand where the line is between like complete holistic lunacy and like advocating for yourself and knowing your body. And I think that people are scared to, you know, I think that in one vein, people are scared to introduce holistic medicine, et cetera, into their lives because they're scared that that's going to like be the same thing as like completely rejecting treatment or whatever, which I don't agree with. But also I think that people get a little scared of advocating for themselves and looking at their treatment options. But also it's one of those things where if you don't have an interest in stuff like this in general, like I have a big interest in academic stuff. Like I read these kinds of things when I am curious about something anyway. And so if this isn't something you are already kind of looking for, it might not even be something you think about to be like, oh, maybe I can see what new research is out there that my doctor, who is not a lymphoma specialist and doesn't have time to catch up with all the literature, maybe hasn't seen. And when I brought this up to my doctor, he said, oh, we literally just talked about this in a conference I just went to last week. This is like a new study. So that was cool. My message would be that if you really feel strongly about something, at least bring it up to your doctor. Don't be scared to ask them questions. And if you have a doctor who is making you feel stupid or ridiculous for asking these questions, and you have the ability to find a new doctor, because you do not have to deal with that. And that I have actually told like more than one person that who has a doctor who won't listen to anything that they're saying, or like talks to them like they're stupid or a child. Okay, see if your practice has another doctor. And one girl I know did switch doctors and had a way better experience with her new one. Mine listened to me and was really great, but like don't feel like you're stuck with this situation of someone not listening to you advocate for yourself. I get nervous about scans. Oh my God. Up until honestly, now I'm almost 5 years out, and I am now, it's just like, okay, I got a CT scan. I'm not worried about it anymore. But for probably 3 years, it was about a week before each scan, I just wanted to vomit. Like I just could not, and I already have very bad anxiety. So, and I was always a hypochondriac. So it was one of those things where I was proven right. My hypochondria was, and I was like, I'll be proven right again. And so I just was really scared every single time. I would just go into this like darkness for like 2 weeks. I definitely got much more in touch with like spiritual stuff and like self-awareness, etc. during cancer. And I think that was a big part of it, because you're just so in your head all the time, and you have to be. I think that one thing that did make me feel better was not doing the insane researching I'm always doing, because that's an anxious tick I have. It's not a good thing all the time. And my husband would be like, no, put the phone down, Or I'd call my dad, and because my dad is the same way. And I'd call him and I'd be like, Dad, I know what you're doing. Like, you need to put the phone down. Like, you're looking at articles right now. And he was like, okay, you have to put the phone down too. So like, we would both be like, do you just get doom scrolling about like, what if it comes back? Like, what if it doesn't clear out the first time? What are my options then? What are other people's stories, etc.? My doctor encouraged me to look into like freezing my eggs. I did the research and I looked into it. And at that point, I was so ready just to get treatment going, because it would delay my treatment another few weeks. And I was just like, and the research I did showed me that ABVD is not super like toxic to, I don't know off the top of my head the specifics. So basically I found that most people were generally fine after the course of treatment that I would have. Now, if I were to go on to a stem cell transplant, I think I would have definitely considered those options at that point. But I decided it honestly just wasn't worth it for me, because I wanted to get going on treatment. I was way more worried about letting the cancer progress. If I had like seen that there was a really high chance that I would like lose fertility, I would have probably frozen my eggs, but I chose not to do that. I know it's really hard, because I was surprised that the doctors were all like, you really need to look into this. Because to me, I was just like, I mean, okay, I just get on with the treatment. Like, I don't want to die. And I was 26, and I wasn't quite at the point where I was thinking about the immediate reality of having kids. Now I'm 30, about to be 31 now. And nowadays, if I were diagnosed, I think that it would be something I would consider way more intensely. But at the time, I couldn't even see past tomorrow, let alone like a future with kids. And I remember I was coming out of one of my surgeries for biopsy, and one of the nurses was like telling me about her friend who'd had Hodgkin's and has all these kids now, and it's great. And I'm like, I don't care. Kind of good for her. Like, at that point, I was just so concerned about, holy shit, I have cancer. I wasn't as concerned about that. But like I said, I'd seen that my chances of remaining fertile were pretty high. So I think if it had been different, I would have probably felt differently about it. I'm still trying to discover what it means, because I think I'm at the point now where I don't think about it every day. And then when I remember, that scares me a little, because I'm like, whoa, that was me. That was such a big part of who I am now. And it is it is the single-handedly the most important thing that's ever happened in my entire life. Good and bad, but mostly good, honestly, in terms of what I'm doing with my life now. But also, it's taken me a long time to kind of deal with the fear and deal with the emotions I was feeling then, because you do push a lot aside and just go into survivor mode. And I'm still dealing with a lot of that. But I think that the most important realization I've had in terms of survivorship is realizing that if my cancer comes back and I don't know what's going to happen, I am not automatically the same person I was when I got it the first time. It doesn't erase any of the progress or changes I've made in my life. It doesn't erase who I am. I'm a different person now, and it'll be a different experience. And also that even if something happened where I had a bad prognosis, like living with cancer in terms of the everyday, it's not something that you can be constantly mourning, because like right now in this very moment, I could have some horrible disease that's going to kill me tomorrow, but I don't know that. And like, I'm still just living this life like this every day. The only difference is like whether or not you're like panicking about it or not. So, and that's easy for me to say now, but it's just something I think about a lot, because I do fear it coming back. And like in my mind, that would like erase all the beautiful things that are in my life now. But I know that that's not true, and that there are like a lot of people that live with chronic cancer that live beautiful lives, and that cancer patients we're not just like people like zombie walking down the hospital. That's not what we are.